What? Okay, wonderful. The recording is just started. This is terrific. So it's really right on time here in Mountain Standard Time. It is 7 p.m. In the Pacific Standard Time, it is 6 p.m. And those of you who are in the Midwest, it is what? It's got to be 8 o'clock in Eastern. It is 9 o'clock. Goodness gracious. So glad that you're all here. Those who are joining as we come and begin our program this evening. We know right now there are about 44 people that have registered or joining, and we're going to give a little time for us to get others to join before we get into some more of the content as we go as well. For many of us here on the Interfaith Network on Mental Illness, it has taken a lot of work to get to the point to this day and this evening, and we are thrilled to be able to be here this evening to bring this program and presentation. And again, one of the reasons why we are recording this as well is so that people will be able to, again, go back and to listen to it again. If you haven't had a chance to take down the notes, whatever they might be. So take some time to think on some of the topics that are going to be raised in this evening. I know those of us on the planning team who have the privilege of bringing our speaker here, we had a chance to read some of the material that our speaker has written. And as some of you probably already realize, that he's a prolific author. And so if you haven't read one of his, I don't know, 25, 26 books, there's a plethora of wonderful material and books that are out there for us to read and to make available. So we're over 50 people right now, which is terrific. So wherever you might be, we're so glad that you are with us. And this is just filling in a little time until we wait till everybody has been able to chance to join us. And then we want to proceed with our program this evening. We know for many of us, this has been one of the best ways that we can stay in touch and connect with each other. Some of you who might know about the Interfaith Network on Mental Illness, that we had at least 70 different programs during the pandemic. And I did notice that there's one chat that just came in. Can't access the sound icon. Maria, are you able to hear me? I'm the only one right now that is speaking. Alan. And are there others that are also having difficulty with sound? Just put something, you might need to change the view up at the top. Okay, that would be, somebody's making a suggestion there. It's all helping each other. Jackie, what would they look for? Are there view options or under view? I can hear well. Scott said, okay. I'm only see 4 people. That is correct. They only see 4 people right now. So that's it. Somebody says I can hear fine. So Maria, I hope you can find that on your screen there to locate that sound. Yeah, so the way that the webinar is set up, that you're only going to be able to see the 4 of us. I'm so sorry. I don't want to apologize for our own faces, but that's kind of how it works. If we have, there are over 114 people who have registered, and so that would make it very difficult to put all those faces on one screen. So that's why we're doing this right now. So I think that those of us are here, and we're, I think, ready to roll to begin, we've already launched, as we say. So might be the time, David, if you'd like to remove the share screen, which is, again, the cover of your book, about which we're going to be hearing a lot more.
Okay. Is the cover of the book on now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Would you like me to remove it?
Sure. Just say
Okay.
from the top.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to turn on my computer speakers. Okay, Otto, that's very good. That's good to know. Great. So those that are here, and Janice, you can keep your video on if you wish at this point, as we're doing the evening welcome. So welcome and good evening to each and all of you. We're so glad that you're here with us on Zoom. I am Alan Johnson, and along with my colleagues, we are the Interfaith Network on Mental Illness, and we're members of the board of directors. We're all volunteers. I will introduce Jackie and Janice in a bit, and we really appreciate our administrator behind the scenes here, Carrie Ray, as well. It is In Me that is hosting this evening. We are a nonprofit based here in Boulder, Colorado, and our mission is to increase awareness and understanding of mental illness among clergy, staff, lay leaders, members of faith communities, the wider community, everyone that can be more effectively develop and nurture supportive environments for persons dealing with mental health challenges and their families and friends. For we do believe that mental health practitioners also can recognize that spirituality is an important component of recovery in one's mental wellness. Now, since 2007, we've offered at least 2 programs every year. So to learn more about us, please go to our website, which is in the chat, inme.us. That's INMI.us, INME.us. And if you're not receiving our newsletters, please do add your email to our list. For through our newsletter, you will receive up-to-date programs and resources that we continue to add. Now, we're very grateful for the sponsors for this evening. So we always want to put this up front as well. And you'll see here, these are our sponsors for our being here this evening. The Atonement Lutheran Church in Boulder, the Community United Church of Christ, Boulder, the First Congregational Church, United Church of Christ, Boulder, the Hope Coalition of Boulder County, the Jewish Family Service, and Restoring Connections. Now, to know more about those sponsors, Carrie is putting in the chat their websites. So please go to those websites, learn more about those if you really need. That would be terrific, because they're so appreciative for the fact that they have been supporting us. And so if you would like to make a donation for the work and the ministry of In Me, please go to our website to do so. Again, that's inme.us. But we are so appreciative of those who give a gift, financial gift, to us as a nonprofit so that we can offer our programs at no charge. So I see now we have 63 people who are here, and I know there are other people who have registered. I hope they join us as the evening goes on. So realizing that we're meeting by Zoom, we can join from anywhere. So I invite you, if you wish, to put in the chat from where you are joining, so we can have a sense of the geographical diversity of those who are gathering around the variety of the screens that are here. So during this evening's program, we're going to invite you also to put your questions and your comments in the Q&A that's at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A. Just type those in. Those will be monitored and will be given to our presenter as the evening goes on. We wanted you to know that this evening's program is being recorded and it will be available on our website. If you have any other pertinent questions at this time, as we turn our attention to our program this evening, just put them in the Q&A and we will continue to monitor those as the evening proceeds. So as I now stop my video, I am going to be introducing to you the Reverend Jackie Hibbard. She's the acting associate pastor at Community United Church of Christ here in Boulder, who is going to lead us in a centering practice. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome to everybody joining us from all over. It's fun to watch where people are putting where you're from in the chat. So thank you so much. So just a really quick exercise to allow us to all become present right here in this moment, to be able to take in fully what Dave has for us tonight. So if you're willing, go ahead and close your eyes wherever you are, or not if you're driving, of course, or gaze softly on the ground in front of you. And if it's possible, put both of your feet on the floor. And notice your breath. Just bring all of your awareness to your breathing. Follow your breath in and out. Noticing that maybe it's starting to slow a little bit. And if you will, imagine that your heart is doing the breathing rather than your lungs. It might take a little bit, but imagine your heart is breathing in and out, taking in those breaths fully and exhaling, becoming more and more present as you follow that breath with your heart. And generate some feelings of appreciation, gratitude, care, and breathe in those feelings into your heart. Again, noticing how your heart is expanding, how your breathing might be slowing. Notice what might change as you're feeling gratitude or care, appreciation. And allowing yourself to be fully present right here in this moment, taking in all of whatever you need to hear tonight, taking it in through and with your heart and all the hearts of those joining us from all over the country. And maybe during the evening, remembering to come back to your breath and allowing your heart to do the breathing for you and seeing what might change and what might be possible for you. And when you're ready, go ahead and open up your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much. So great to be centered and to be open and ready. And I'd like to introduce you to all of us to Janice Geiger. Janice is the shelter manager of Homeless Outreach Providing Encouragement, Hope, who will introduce our evening's speaker. Welcome, Janice.
Thank, thank you, Alan. We are privileged to have Dr. David Rico, Ph.D., as our guest speaker this evening. David is a renowned psychotherapist and prolific author. Among his many books are How to Be an Adult in Relationships, The 5 Keys to Manage, and the Happiness We Find in Embracing Them. His topic for this evening is When We're Triggered. He has written, I intend to help us find out what triggers are, where they come from, and how to use our psychological and spiritual work to turn our reactions into healing responses. Please join me as we welcome Dr. David Rico.
Thank you, Janice. And welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. And I certainly want to thank Alan and everyone for inviting me. Our topic, of course, is when we're triggered. And I want to begin by saying that triggering is totally normal. It is not a sign of mental illness. And everyone is triggered pretty much every day. If we weren't triggered, we wouldn't really be totally alive, because a trigger is a response or sometimes a reaction to what happens around us. And part of being human and present in the world is to live with what happens. And when you experience what you live with, people, places, things, events, it's just totally normal sometimes to be triggered into sadness, sometimes into anger, sometimes into grief, sometimes into excitement. Triggers can be positive or negative. And I'll talk more about this as we go along. But I'd like to begin with an affirmation that places us in the context of spirituality, because I want to have my presentation come from a spiritual consciousness, which I believe is a top-notch way of working with triggers. So I'm going to share the screen, and I'll read this. Hopefully everyone can see this. So first I'll read it, and then I'm going to comment on it line by line. And I, by the way, say this every morning when I wake up. I say yes to everything that happens to me today as an opportunity to give or receive love and to free myself from fear. I am thankful for the enduring capacity to love that has come to me from the Sacred Heart of the universe. May everything that happens to me today open my heart more and more. May all that I think, say, feel, do, and am express loving kindness toward myself, those close to me, and all beings. May love be my life purpose, my bliss, my destiny, my calling, the richest grace I can receive or give. And may I always be especially compassionate toward people who are considered least or last, or who feel alone or lost. To begin with the yes to everything that happens without exception, as some kind of opportunity, an opportunity of grace, an offer from the free gift dimension of life, coming from God, universe, however you best describe the source of this love that is at the same time a freedom from fear. What is in an opportunity? What are the things that happen? Opportunities for? Two things: to give and receive love, and to free ourselves from fear. Or another way of saying it would be to bring more love into our lives and less fear. So instead of thinking that what happens, especially the things that trigger us, are just simply happenings, I'm proposing that there is no such thing as just a happening, that everything is an opportunity to give love, to receive love, to let go of fear. In other words, the whole universe is set up to help us expand as humans and enter into the fullness of who we are. Who are we? We are here, we are from, we are for love and fearlessness. So this is a reconfiguration of events, of people, of happenings, of strange turns of fate. And instead of thinking of them as onslaughts and we're the victims, we're thinking of them as wonderful graces. This leads us to be thankful. Thankful for what? For the enduring capacity. It's a capacity that never goes away. It can't be taken away. The enduring capacity to love. Where did this capacity come from? It has come to each of us from the very center of the universe, which expands out to every human like rays of light. And that center is not a mind or a thing, it's a heart. And since it's all about love, it's sacred. Then I ask in a kind of affirming way that everything that happens to me in the course of this particular day would open my heart more and more, just as the sacred heart of the universe opened itself to me by giving me these graces. What graces? The graces of all the things that happen in the course of the day that gave me chances to love more and fear less. Then I dedicate myself that all that I might think, say, feel, do, and am in the course of this particular day or of my whole life would become expressions, articulations, incarnations of loving kindness. And this loving kindness is directed in three ways. It's directed toward myself, toward those who are near and dear to me, and to people far and wide. In fact, to all beings, human and animal alike. So basically, I'm dedicating the thoughts, the words, the feelings, the doings, and my whole being to one goal, and that is to express love toward myself and others. In fact, I would like this love to be my life purpose. I'd like to start thinking of my life purpose not as making more money, fulfilling my goals, advancing in my career, finding a good relationship, and improving the relationship I'm in. I would like my life purpose to be expressing loving kindness toward myself and others. I would like it to be the greatest joy of my life, my bliss. I would like it to be what I'm headed toward, my destiny. I would like to feel it as a calling. And most of all, I would like to experience it as the richest grace that ever came to me or that could ever be given through me. And finally, I'm dedicating myself to pay special attention in a compassionate, empathic way toward any people who are considered least of all, last in line for justice, those who are treated inequitably, those who are hated because of their beliefs, their color, their sexual orientation, their political bent. I want to be especially compassionate toward people who are excluded, the people who feel alone, lost, the people who haven't had the chances that I have had. I want to be paying special attention to them in this outreach of loving kindness that flowed from the original yes. In 2 Corinthians, St. Paul, speaking of Jesus, says, "In him there was only yes." I want that to be true of me. Only yes. Yes to what? To everything that happens as an opportunity to love more and fear less. So, beginning this way places us in the context of spirituality. And I believe it's the very best way to approach our topic of triggers, because triggers sometimes are the opposite of everything in this prayer/affirmation. This, by the way, this that I've just read is pretty much in all of my recent books. And it's also on my website. You see it here, daverico.com. And one of the buttons is free articles. And in those free articles, you'll see this a number of times. So you can find it there. And I hope it's of help to you. This prepares us for our topic of triggers. So this is the first paragraph of my book, Triggers. Someone says something to us and we're suddenly struck with a sinking feeling in our stomach. We've all had that happen. That's being triggered. Someone does something and we're instantly enraged, fly off the handle, road rage, for instance, or we're alarmed, that is scared. Someone comes at us with a certain attitude and we go all to pieces. We hear mention of a person, place, or thing that, is associated with some trauma in our life or some unresolved issue, and we immediately feel ourselves seize up with sadness, anger, fear, or shame. Those are the 4 usual reactions that are triggered in us. And when any of this happens, we can be sure that a trigger has been pulled. Trigger basically is about stimulus response. So someone comes at us, that's stimulus, we go to pieces, that's response. Happens to all of us. What she said triggered me. You could also use the word button. He presses my buttons. You could also use the word charge. I have a charge on this. It all refers to the same basic concept. And I'm going to show that it's often connected to a past trauma, that something already happened to us. As Heidegger, the German existentialist philosopher, said, the dreadful has already happened. When new dreadful things happen, they're just replays, spin-offs of the original terribly hurtful thing that occurred to us, over which we had no control, and under which we were totally powerless. But we're learning to restore the power that was always in us. And what we are going to talk about today will help us do this, because I'm going to be giving specific ways to deal with triggers. So I'm going to look at one more part of this, then I'm going to open it up for questions to be sure that everybody's on the same page. So now I'm ready for the definition. And this is the second paragraph of the book. A trigger is any word, person, event, or experience that touches off an immediate emotional reaction. For example, sadness, depression, anger, aggression, fear, panic, humiliation, shame. So it can be words, behavior, attitudes, events that come at us, even the presence of certain people. Just to have the person in the room can incite a reflex reaction, hence the word trigger, but as in trigger happy. In other words, something suddenly happens over which we have no control. This is very important. If it's a true trigger, you just react and you have no control over it. The only control we're going to have is to pause when we're anywhere near what might trigger us and arm ourselves in such a way that we access our inner resources. So let's use a simple example that applies to everyone. We're suddenly surprised by a noise and we're startled. See, you have no control over being startled. It's normal to be startled by a sudden loud noise that you weren't expecting. The noise is the stimulus, also called trigger. The startled response is the reaction. And our reaction can be brief or long. Sometimes we can move through the reaction in a moment, just comes and goes. Or sometimes it can become an obsession, hard to shake off. It can last for a long time. When it becomes an obsession, we feel like we've lost our power and we feel unsafe and insecure, which is, of course, exactly what trauma makes happen. So that's how we came full circle to our trauma idea. So what is a trigger? it's the stimulus, and over that we have no control. The immediate reaction, over that we have no control until we've worked on it and gain the power of pausing between stimulus and response. What's the name of this pause? So stimulus, then pause, then response. Then it'll be a response rather than a reaction. So ordinarily, it's stimulus, then response. But it could be this. That little pause is also called so let's look at it once more. So we have this. When it's stimulus with no pause, just a reaction, you're compelled. You lost your freedom. When it's stimulus, then pause, then you decide your response. That's freedom. So now we've looked at the definition and a little bit about how we're going to be working with this very fascinating topic. And by the way, the reason I wrote this book was very interesting. I've been a therapist now for 50 years. Prior to that, I was a Catholic priest for 3 years. And in all these years, I asked myself, what was the word I heard the most from clients and others? And the word was triggers. So that's how I came up with the book, idea of the book. Okay, any questions about anything so far? And if you do have a question, just put it in there, the question and the Q&A.
Well, I was trying to figure that out, actually. I go to the Q&A and I don't see no questions that are there.
Okay.
I put it in chat and said, are you able to get that or not? If not, put it in the chat and we'll follow that as well. So Jackie did respond to the question from Tamara about trying to find the first prayer that you shared, David. Was asking again, where can it be found? And Jackie indicated that at davidrico.com/free-book.
Yeah, well, it's Dave Rico, I think. But
Dave, right? Dave Rico.
Are you referring to this? Are you referring to this?
Was that it, Tamara? Is that
Yes,
exactly
that's what he was asking.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
that's
will be,
what Tamara is asking.
for that, just go to, it's in any of the recent books, including this one. But just go to daverico.com and then go to free articles, and you'll find it there in the articles, pretty much in every article. I try to share it everywhere I go. Okay.
That's great. That's great.
Now, do we have any questions, or we must be all set then?
There was another question here that came up. Are some triggers that are positive or most triggers negative?
No, they're positive too. etc.
Hmm.
So they're both positive and negative. Same thing is happening. Your stimulus is common, and then you have a certain reaction. Let's say you're working with people in hospice, and somebody says something, and you just say something that's so meaningful, and you're so present when you say it. You say it with such feeling. It really comes through to the other person, and you have the sense that it didn't come from you, it came through you. That is the nature of grace. A Holy Spirit, the same Spirit that brooded over the waters in the first sentence of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, the world was dark and void. The Spirit of God brooded over the waters. The actual Hebrew word is glided over the waters. That's the Spirit that comes through us. And sometimes we hear ourselves say something that we know has wisdom in it, and we know that we didn't have that wisdom prior to that moment. Was that the only other question?
That's the one we have right now.
Okay.
Tamar was on the website, Dave, and Tamar can't find on the website the opening prayer.
Well, why don't we do this? Can we just send these notes to everyone in the group, Alan?
Hmm.
If I send you this document?
Carrie, what do you think about that? We can send this. We're recording it, so therefore we will have this on the website, in the website.
Can you put this? Can you put the opening prayer onto the website?
Yes, we can do that.
Yes.
Okay, let's just do it that way.
Okay.
All right. Now, I want to go on to this because I want to be sure we get it, that our goal in the work that we do to have better mental health with regard to triggers, our goal is not to root out all our triggers. That totally can't be done. What we want to do instead, and look how positive this is to find a trailhead from the triggers into the psychological and spiritual work that has been so long awaiting us. This is how we turn our triggers into tools. This has been the most important thing I learned when I was writing this book, because I didn't know this beforehand. But it suddenly came to me. I said, but since everything that happens is an opportunity, it must be that every trigger is an opportunity. And it must be that I can go into my specific personal triggers, and every one of us has them, and I'll give some examples. And to see a trigger as a trailhead into the dark forest of my inner life, going all the way back to childhood. As you will see, triggers often hook up with childhood experiences. This is how we turn our triggers into tools. Then we're no longer scared off by them. Oh, we're so glad to discover the trigger because, hey, we found the trailhead. And all we have to do is follow the sinuous path into the depths of ourselves. So our goal will never get rid of triggers. That would not be human nor necessary. Our goal is not to root out our triggers, but to find a trailhead from them into the psychological and spiritual work that has been so long awaiting us. And that's how we turn our triggers into tools. Regarding the psychological and spiritual work, I do want to give you a reference because my latest book is called Wholeness and Holiness. It's published by Orbis, came out last year, and this is the topic that I thought would be a good one for today, but we're on the topic of triggers, that's fine. But this book is about how to be sane, spiritual, and saintly. Don't stop here, psychological and spiritual. Go on to sanctity, which is the calling for all of us. So how to be whole, how to be holy, and it's sanity, spirituality, and sanctity. This is a really good reference for anybody who wants to follow up on this topic. And I really put a lot into it, and I think you might really like it. So, this work that I'm describing, which is psychological and spiritual, we're not alone in doing it. Something, we know not what, is always and everywhere, lovingly at work, we know not how, to make the world more than it is now, to make us more than we are yet, one sacred heart never apart. So our work is not just finding psychological tools. It's not even spiritual practice combined with psychological tools. It's not even all the saintly, courageous, and heroic deeds and graces. It's something more than all of that. It's something that we will never totally understand, a mystery. And I really want to bring this in because it reminds us that there's something bigger going on than we can put a name to. Something. We don't know what it is, but we do know that it's always and everywhere working. How is it working? By making everything that happens an opportunity for more love and less fear. By making every trigger a trailhead into the things in ourselves that we need to work on and complete. It's always lovingly at work, and we just don't know how it's at work. We just could never really know the ins and outs of it. What is it up to? This something, this, you could call it God, you could call it grace, you could call it the evolutionary universe, but it's something that's trying to make the whole world more than it is now, and to make every one of us more than we are yet. What could we possibly be? We could, instead of being all discrete, competing, opposing individuals, we could become one sacred heart humanity, never again divided. our work on ourselves is never just being done by us. There is a power that's always at work, joining us. I don't remember which book is it of the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, but it's something about, it's a person about to go into battle, but the army is way too small compared to the army of the enemy. And God says to the general, but you don't notice all the wonderful spiritual allies that I have lined up to go with this, to go with you, soldiers. You don't see the something we know not what that is joining you. Like, you know, crowds of angels, I guess. Archetypal way of describing powers that are certainly not always visible, but always lovingly at work. So let's keep that in mind as we move along.
One of the questions we might ask at this particular point, if you wish to pursue this at all, David, I'm not sure, but in terms of your own personal experience, how have you come to affirm the something? I mean,
you could call it something,
well,
or you could call it someone,
mm-hmm.
or you could call it a mystery, or you could call it a presence. I chose something because I wanted to use a word that would include, that would have everybody feel okay using it, rather than prejudice it toward religion or theism. For instance, in Buddhism, we could say bodhisattvas, which are enlightened people who are helping the rest of us find enlightenment. We could say a guardian angel. We could, you know, whatever works for you. The Great Mother would be another example. But the point of this is that we're not going to be alone as we do this work on triggers. Something else is kicking in to help us. It's activated by seeing us take our work seriously. Okay, any other questions before we go on? Because now I'm going to go on to the, you know, what causes the triggers, where the triggers come from. And I have 3 specific sources that we're going to work with. But first, I want to check in with you all.
Yeah, there is a question that's come now in our Q&A. And here's the question to you, Dave. Do you feel that experiences which propel us into a constant state of trigger trauma are like a crash course in self-understanding? And how do we move out of the place of trauma pain to find the wisdom?
Well, that's the whole purpose of our meeting today, and I hope I do approach that. But I love the way you put it. And yes, it's a crash course. And, you know, I think of myself as a landing strip, and some planes crash land on me and some land safely. And I remain after they clean it all up or after they fly away. And yeah, you're right. This is a crash course, and crash used in 2 ways. short and sweet, but at the same time, kind of challenging. Could hit you pretty hard. Yes, we'll be on the topic that you're describing. And if I don't answer what you just brought up in the second half, because we're going to take our 10-minute break shortly, in the second half, please bring it up again. But you really got the point, which is that triggers are themselves a crash course in finding out who we are. Because as I will point out, two kinds of triggers. So I'll give myself a note so I'll be sure to deal with this. Two kinds of triggers.
And there was just a very quick PS again from a cat who asked that question. When I say constant triggers, I mean when there is no real space between triggering events.
Well, that would have more to do with ongoing trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Triggers are specific stimuli that you can put your finger on. And so that, what you brought up is not really about triggers. It's about an ongoing state of trauma, insecurity, fear. It's not quite what triggers are about. I'm going to remind myself to talk about the two kinds of triggers. Okay, was there one more question?
Those are the two that I saw.
I beg your pardon?
Those are the two that I just saw.
Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock or 7 here in California. So we're going to take a 10-minute break and just do some stretching and some, try not to be triggered between now and then. And,
Right.
and just come back here in 10 minutes and we will pick it up from here. I'll leave this on the screen in case you want to copy it.
Right.
It's also in all my books.
Make it on the sly side of 10 minutes so we can come back and continue on. Thank you.
Alan, are you here?
Yes, indeed. And you
Okay,
are
I
as
think
well.
we're ready to start.
Yes, I think that's great. I think that people are coming back. It's right on time. So I encourage people to consider some questions and comments, but we're ready for part two.
Okay, and then do you need about 5 minutes at the end for your closing presentation?
Oh, no, just a minute.
Okay. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I did want to go on to the two kinds of triggers. Some are very personal. They happen only to me or you. For instance, you become afraid or you feel you're in danger if you dare to displease a woman or a man. So it could go toward women, or it could go toward men, or it could go to people who don't identify themselves as women or men. But that would be specifically to you, whereas a trigger of being rejected, pushed aside, when everybody else is in, you're out, being on the outs, that feeling of rejection, that one is universal. So everyone will be triggered by this, but not everyone will be triggered if he said something and a woman didn't like it. To him, it would be just water off a duck's back. But to you, it might be a big deal. And it's going to hook back into childhood in some way. If you displease your mother, she hit you, then it's going to always feel dangerous to displease a woman, because in the amygdala, the part of the brain that is triggered, you're still afraid that you might be hit by a woman. And by the way, triggers don't happen in the prefrontal cortex. That's why you can't reason yourself out of them. They happen in the limbic system, in the emotional part of the brain, especially in the part that is most primitive, which is the amygdala, where we will feel these threats and we will have a fear reaction that isn't really based on legitimate danger. By the way, regarding fear, I want to refer you to another one of my resources, because I did a free, I have a number of YouTubes. So if you go to Dave Rico on YouTube, one of them is something about letting go of fear. And I take you through affirmations that help you let go of fear reactions. And it's all free, of course. All the things I'm mentioning are free. And I'm trying to share my resources, not trying to sell books. So, okay. So now we're going to go into, where do triggers come from? And they come from three possible sources among many. So I'm choosing three main ones, and I'm going to describe each one. But notice how it's easy to remember because it spells the word see. I want to see where this trigger came from. And I also use this as a method when I feel upset by something, or something really bothers me, sticks in my craw. I will ask myself my three questions. Is this my shadow, my ego, or is this something from my early life? I'll show you how to do this. I think it's really helpful. Shadow is a word used by Carl Jung, and it refers to the unacceptable traits, desires, impulses, attitudes in our personality that were repressed long ago and now we disavow them or even deny them. We don't want to admit that we have what could be called a dark side. Dark side as in the Star Wars film. It remains unconscious. So you just don't even realize that there's a part of you that is not so pretty to look at. But when you do see it in someone else, you react with criticism or with anger. And you never imagine that you could be like that. Actually, we're looking at another person as a mirror when we judge them or criticize them. A mirror that forces us to see what we don't want to see in ourselves. Unfortunately, this projection is the equivalent of not being able to integrate our shadow side because it seems alien, entirely outside of us. When our reaction to how someone triggered us is such a projection, we are looking at a shadow issue in ourselves. So let's use an example. We do not see that we are very controlling in our relationships to others. We don't see that we're like that. We don't see that we're manipulative. But when someone else is openly controlling, we're triggered and we react with anger or competition or retaliation. And we don't get it, that the reason we are so triggered by somebody else being controlling is because we have that in ourselves, but we don't want to look at it. We fail to see that we're looking at a picture of our own controlling style. Something we haven't yet admitted. And by the way, there's also a positive shadow. Those are the wonderful gifts that we deny in ourselves, but admire in others. And these are a couple of paragraphs from this part of the book, just to give you the overall picture. Now, so some triggers tell you something about yourself that you are afraid to admit is true, especially when it's blame or anger or criticism or judgment of someone else. See, even blame is yet another trailhead into the hidden parts of ourselves. Now, it could be that instead of it being shadow, it's ego. So let's see what that's about. This would be the inflated ego, arrogant, I'm above others, strut, swagger, I'm too big to fail, I'm a big shot. And when someone comes along and pulls us down a peg or two, it triggers a reaction of indignation. How dare they do this? Don't they realize how wonderful I am? And behind that is the fear that we're being found out to be less than we think we are, or less than we want to believe that we are. We're panicked because we seem to be losing our entitlement to honor and recognition, losing our status as a big shot. And our reaction of indignation shows us we have work to do on ourselves. The work is building a healthy ego, not inflated, not deflated, but Goldilocks just right. And as we escape the bondage of self-importance, we feel the arising in us of a bond to all beings. It's no longer the separate me, it's the me with others, the one sacred heart never apart. And that is a spiritual victory. In fact, I actually believe that letting go of ego is a special grace. It's not something you can do by psychological practices. It's a spiritual conversion. What does conversion mean in Latin? To turn together. Con is together. Version is turn together. We're all turning to a different view of who I am. So it could be I'm triggered because what I see in others is what's in me, but dark, not visible. It could be that what triggered me aroused my ego. That's the second origin. Or it could be what just happened was a replay of something that happened in my childhood. Our childhood home was not supposed to be a hard hat area. You weren't supposed to be always trying to defend yourself. Distressing or abusive events that happened in early life can trigger us. In other words, distressing and abusive events that happened in early life and now happen again can trigger us. We will feel especially wounded by any trigger that taps into what is most unresolved from our interactions with our original caregivers. So in other words, if you still haven't worked out, haven't done the work of working through childhood issues, then you wind up carrying it with you as a burden and being triggered over and over again. The title of one of my books says it all: the past in the present. The past in the present. And it's a rare person who has the present in the present. We all instead have the past in the present. We're continually seeing replays of our past. We even choose our partners on the basis of that era. Someone says or does something that mimics what one of our parents said or did. We're reacting not only to what's happening in the present moment, but also to the original transactions with our parent that were never fully resolved. We're transferring, called transference in therapy, onto people now the feelings, needs, attitudes, and expectations that actually applied to people in the past. Thus, we see a parental face in the person in front of us. So we mistakenly see one of our parents in the one triggering us. We're reacting as if the parent who triggered us long ago is triggering us again now. This would be the most common of the deeper triggers. This would be the most common source. So the triggers have three sources. They spell see, to see what's going on. You ask yourself, is this about me that I'm projecting onto someone else? Is this about my ego that's suddenly bruised and I'm going to retaliate? Or is this exactly like what happened to me in early life and now it's happening again? Where do triggers come from? They come from shadow or ego or early life. How do we work with our shadow? How do we work with our triggers? We work with our negative shadow, the unacceptable traits that we are denied and repressed in ourselves. We find ways to let go of that unhealthy ego in favor of a healthy ego. and we work through our childhood issues. That's how we do the work. That's how triggers take us into the deep forest of ourselves. What's in the deep forest of ourselves? Three things: early life, inflated ego, and shadow. Alan, you had your hand up?
Oh, somebody else did. We're just responding now. That's okay.
Okay, go ahead. Do you have a question?
Jackie is responding to the person who raised their hand. We'll wait to hear from them.
You can go ahead, Dave. We don't have the question yet.
Okay. So you see, the triggers take us into provinces of ourselves that we may not yet have franchised. We've denied the vote to parts of ourselves that just don't seem safe to acknowledge. Negatively, as in being selfish; positively, as in being heroically generous. We all have both. And when we keep it all hidden and not admit it, then it's like a shadow of ourselves, a shadow that we're projecting as the sun shines on us. Secondly, we're triggered by people who dare to disregard our entitlement, our specialness, our bigness, our have to be in controlness, deny the honor that we think belongs to us. That's really what's happening in road rage. What's really happening there is ego rage. You're basically saying, how dare he treat me that way? How dare he cut me off? Doesn't he realize that this freeway was created just for me? And imagine he's doing this to me. He's not acknowledging the fact that I'm the most important person driving a car. That's what gets us so upset. Perfect example of triggering, by the way. And that would be one that's kind of a universal trigger. But you can work on it. I found my own way of working on it. I take my foot off the accelerator if somebody cuts me off. I take my foot off the accelerator and I say a little prayer. May you find Buddha's enlightened path. May you arrive safely. Or you can say something like, may God bless you and keep you safe, and may you not harm others. When you turn it into a prayerful response, you release yourself from the triggering.
Dave, this might be a really good point to ask a question that's in the Q&A. Where does
Okay, go ahead.
forgiveness, where does forgiveness fit into our possible responses after we pause?
Okay, so let me just say something about forgiveness, which goes with ego, because ego finds it hard to forgive. So forgiveness is letting go of blame, ill will, and the need to retaliate. See, forgiveness is different from pardon, and it's also different from excusing. Most people think to forgive is to excuse. That's not forgiveness, that's pardon. I mean, so the judge releases you from paying a fine or going to jail. In other words, he cancels consequences. That's called pardoning. That's what a judge can do. That's what we can do with our children. Oh, you did this, but I'm not going to punish you by confining you to your room, or I'm not going to ground you this time. So you're canceling the consequences. That's different from the highly spiritual act of forgiveness. So pardoning is about the one above to the one below. Forgiveness makes everyone equal. There'll be no blame, no ill will, and no need to retaliate. That's the difference from my point of view. Was there another question?
I would like to pick up one comment. It's kind of maybe parallel to this, and maybe not quite, but it is when we're talking about that there are sometimes collective triggers in origin. And then you said, for example, mass shootings, war, or hate crimes. It seems like it's back about the C, S-E-E. It's an inner work, an inner journey for us to befriend our shadow, to come to terms with our ego. But what do we do with the external reality? For those of us who are here in Boulder, we've had that experience with the mass shooting. Unfortunately, they're across the country. But how do we deal with those triggers? Because they really are more collective, therefore, in origin, which is you have written already.
Okay, you're referring to a specific paragraph in the book, so I'm going to place it here. So this gene pool of ours, we humans of today, this gene pool has some serious birth defects. Mm. We have a collective. By collective, that means all of humanity, not just you as an individual. Not only is there an individual shadow side, such as being controlling, there's also a collective shadow side of all of our gene pool, of all humanity. It's a penchant toward harming, hurting, engaging in, or standing by and allowing evil. This collective negative shadow in us has included and still includes war, torture, genocide, hate crimes, revenge, oppression, slavery, greed, abuse of the earth, and myriad forms of violence. We're experts on violence, and retaliation is our very favorite sport. When I say we, I mean our gene pool. In the face of these harsh examples of aggression, we can instead choose goodness and join with those who stand up for what is just and beneficial. On the other hand, we sometimes join the evil forces or even persecute those who stand for goodness. So when we can choose goodness and stand up for what is just, that's the positive collective shadow. So our gene pool has two sides. It has negative, war, torture, genocide, all of which are happening right this minute and have been happening since Cain killed Abel. Not one day has ever passed when this was not happening. And also not one day ever passed when this was not happening. So triggers that relate to this topic are ones that we would join other groups or support groups that take a stand for was there another question?
I don't see one at this particular point.
Okay. Good. So one way to work with triggers that I found helpful, this famous, these aren't the exact words, but this is based on a famous prayer by Reinhold Niebuhr, written in 1943. He was a Lutheran theologian. And he said he came up with the prayer, may God grant me the grace to accept with serenity the things I cannot change, and so forth. You've all heard it. And I would like to propose that this shouldn't be just used in 12-step programs, that a way to work with triggers is precisely this way. How can I, and this happens within the pause, I'm going to come back to how we do the pausing, that within the pause, I say to myself, how can I accept instead of oppose what's happening that can't be changed? So something is happening that can't be changed. For instance, some of my family members support a political view that I find dangerous and disturbing and irrational. And there's nothing I can say that will change their minds. So instead of being triggered on Thanksgiving, when they start presenting their political views, I simply accept with serenity that person's right to have that view without having to believe it. If it's truly disturbing, And if it's happening in a way that is upsetting, my pause can be excusing myself, going to the bathroom, going outside, coming back when things have quieted down, while at the same time, I say, may I have the courage to change the things that can be changed if someone is open to making a change. And of course, the wisdom to know the difference could only come from the Holy Spirit. We can't make ourselves have such wisdom, but we can ask for it. Holy Spirit, give me the wisdom to know the difference between what I have to accept with serenity and what I may have the courage to change. Give me the grace to have that courage. And you can hear in how I'm making this whole presentation that I'm never just speaking as a psychotherapist, but also as a kind of chaplain to those who are dealing with triggers. That's what we want to be. We want to be a combination of helpers as therapists and as chaplains, as spiritual helpers, as allies. So I'm finding this very helpful also as part of dealing with triggers. Now, let's say something about pause, because of course it's the key. The ability to pause between stimulus and response. Or maybe we should say stimulus and reaction. Reaction has more of the feeling of it just happens beyond your control. And that's what triggers are really about. They're about reactions that happen over which you have no control until you catch sight of what's going on and give yourself some control. How do we pause between stimulus and reaction? Well, at the beginning of our program, we had that very helpful presentation in which Reverend Jackie helped us by recommending this combination. It's a centering. I'll say more about what that is. And it's a breathing technique. And it's a grounding. So by centering, I come back to the center of who I am. What is the center of who I am? It's this. I come back to that center. I do my take a breath, take a deep breath, take 3 breaths, take however many breaths you need to settle yourself. And then the grounding is, let me just be right here on the earth. Buddha was once asked by his enemies, who are you? Are you a god? Are you a teacher? Are you an angel? Are you a demon? He touched the earth and answered, I am awake. What does awake mean? I get it that I no longer have to be at the mercy of triggers. How am I no longer at the mercy of triggers? I now pause between stimulus and reaction. Okay, hold it, hold it. You just said something, and I'm closing, squinting my eyes like this, and I'm saying, hold it, hold it. You just said something. I really need to think about this. I don't want to go into a trigger reaction. Let me just center myself as who I am. Let me take a couple of deep breaths and let me just ground myself, just feel myself right here on this earth. And then I'm going to respond. In other words, the pausing means I'm no longer forced to react. Which is, of course, the same as I don't have freedom. That's what triggers are all about. You lose your freedom. Pausing is how you get your freedom back. And by pause, I mean time. It takes time. It takes a minute, or it takes an hour, or it takes whatever. But I don't want to get caught in an argument here, so I need to pause. When I'm ready, I will respond. You have to be that assertive. Can't be that assertive, you remain at the mercy of these triggers. And maybe never have the wisdom to know the difference between what? Not only a difference between things I cannot change, but the difference between, is it early life that is aroused now? Is it ego that's aroused? Or is it the shadow that's aroused? So regarding the early life, remember that the traumas that happened to us originally, as I said at the beginning, are the ones that now lead to triggering. So that's why we will get very triggered when we visit our relatives. They know exactly which triggers to pull because they invented the guns. We're not holding it against them. We're just being careful not to become aroused, reactive, defensive, blaming. We're not going to get caught in that. If we are, we're going to take a break, leave the premises, then come back. We're not going to hold it against them. We're not going to blame them. They're triggered also by their own traumas. We'll be feeling compassion for them as well as for ourselves. And we're going to have possibly fewer visits, shorter duration, if the triggers are so great that they raise our blood pressure. Because triggers also have a lot to do with your physical health. Okay, any final questions before I start winding up?
A little bit. This is from one of the articles that you had written. How do you stay calm in the face of painful memories, especially if you have that, you said before, the past is now in the present. So in that present, and those triggers are there, that in that pause, what are some of the either the Buddhist or Christian practices that can actually not only give us that minute, that time, that hour, whatever is needed before we respond, that brings calm? Or are there practices that you have found most helpful?
Yes, I'd like to mention one that also is from the life of Buddha. At one point, his enemies sent an aggressive elephant to trample and kill him. As the elephant approached him, he looked into the eyes of the elephant and he saw fear and caring more about the elephant and how distressed he was. He raised his right hand, meaning no to fear. Don't be afraid, fear not. He took his left hand, placed it in his lap, meaning yes to love, no to fear, yes to love. And when the elephant saw this and realized that the Buddha was placing the elephant's concern above his own life, he stopped and bowed to the enlightened one. And this, what I'm doing right now, you will see on statues of Buddha, and this is what it means. It's a hand gestures that calm us, and they're called mudras, M-U-D-R-A-S. And this is the first mudra, no to fear and yes to love. So when you pause, you could do that. You could say no to the fear that is in me and yes to the love that's in me. That'll all be part of the centering. And remember that you have to have a certain amount of assertiveness to do the pausing. You have to actually believe that you have the right to pause, that you're not forced into giving an immediate response, that you don't have to be caught up in an argument and fire answers back when someone says something to you. That's really being caught up in all this triggering stimulus and response. We're placing pause in the middle. It's kind of a big topic, and you'll see it described more in detail in the book. But basically, I would recommend pausing all over the place rather than waiting until you're triggered. For instance, let's say you're watching the news and you hear that there's been another terrible shooting in a school. Press pause on your remote and just sit there in grief. Let yourself feel the grief. Center yourself in your grief. Do some breathing. Ground yourself as a child of earth. Feel whatever compassion is coursing through you. Only then press play. I teach a poetry class, and we read a famous poem called Ulysses by Tennyson, which has a lot to do with, how things change as you get older. And I could tell that the people in the class were really touched by the theme of the poem. So when one of the students finished reading the poem, instead of saying, "Okay, now are there any comments or questions about the poem?" Instead of saying that, I said, "Now let's just have a moment of silence and just be with whatever feelings came up when she read the poem." So you practice your pausing all over the place when you're standing in line at the grocery, in the supermarket. You're doing your breathing, you're doing your centering, grounding yourself. You're not allowing all those noisy inputs to come in as deeply. You're just kind of, just being present as yourself with your own thoughts and your own feelings. So I recommend pausing as another spiritual practice, not just meditation and deep breathing separately, but make meditation and deep breathing happen as pauses throughout the day. Okay, well, our time is running out. Is there one last question?
Do you see one, Jackie?
I do not.
Okay, well, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for listening, and I hope what I've said had some impact and helped you. And let's just now have just a one moment of pause, of silence, and just appreciate one another as equal participants in this human project of becoming people who love more and fear less. Thank you, and I'd like to end with this short poem by Edwin Markham. They drew a circle to shut me out, called me heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and brought them in. Thank you all.
David, we want to thank you so much for your inclusiveness for each and all of us, for your gentle and guiding wisdom, your grace-filled sharing. So on behalf of INME, the Interfaith Network, we hope that each of all of us who have been on this webinar, we have gained from your time with you, Dave. And as we do sign off, all saying thank you in whatever way we will, I would offer shalom, shalom, and peace. And indeed, may we be blessed with pauses.
Thank you, Alan.
Blessing to each and all. Thank you for being with us this evening, and we'll continue to be nurtured by the wisdom you shared. And we appreciate that centered place from which you have spoken, Dave. Thank you so much, and bless you.
My pleasure.
Bye, everybody. Thanks again. Peace and be well.